How much longer now? My. This is the legend of Deltarune. Why are these spelt differently? Ralsei's retelling of the prophecy shows every time you load a completed chapter, so it feels odd that this would be a mistake. We know there's things left out of his story because Ralsei wished to change fate, but that's such an odd detail to change. Not only does the church in the Dark World call it Deltarune, but so does the Light World religion. Hell, even the Eggman calls it Deltarune. The voice we hear at the start of the game, who I'm calling Gaster for simplicity, always refers to it as Deltarune too, whether that be in-game or during his tweeting sprees. The only other time it's called Deltarune is in reference to the symbol itself, either by Chris's narration at the bunker or by Gerson in Undertale. The legend of Deltarune would imply that it's the legend of a symbol, rather than the legend of the prophecy. Delta represents a change in something in terms of math, and is one of the two words there. It's clearly intentional. However, this might not be something Ralsei is doing intentionally. It could be subconsciously, something only us as the soul could tell, like, we don't know if Ralsei is saying Deltarune or Deltarune to Chris and Susie, so it's impossible to truly know. From Toby Fox's view though, it's an intentional decision to put that space there. So, what is he telling us about Ralsei? First, I want to establish a baseline of what Ralsei knows, then go through a few scenarios considering who he's allied with. Ralsei doesn't seem shocked by or comment on the validity of any of the panels in Chapter 4. He has a general understanding of the angel and prior knowledge of the panel that Susie breaks, so he does know this prophecy. Ralsei has a general, if not advanced, understanding of the soul and its capabilities. He knows we can see through walls, likely that we control Chris, and explicitly that we can be shooed away when he prompts Chris to think of something else. The trailing sentences we see in Chapter 1 and 2 don't appear again, however, which could be Ralsei learning through experience how to tell when we're back in Chris's body, but that's speculation. Regardless, he has to have an additional source of information, whether that be a third party, he was just made with the knowledge, there's a more detailed explanation of the prophecy, or even just more of the vague panels we haven't seen yet. Ralsei's lack of knowledge can also be used as a tool for us. Since he knows so much, it's important to mention what he doesn't. For example, the entire Titan fight. The way he addresses the situation feels very improv. Ralsei's intelligent, so he's making good calls, but they're made without the certainty of the prophecy behind them. Therefore, we know that even with this additional source of info, there are still gaps to his knowledge. If we assume Ralsei has no external alliances, then him saying Deltarune could be a representation of his hope for the ending to change. Whether intentional or subconscious, he adds that space to symbolize a change in the prophecy. It could also be small foreshadowing that this legend wasn't the whole truth. But this doesn't explain how he knows what the soul is and its capabilities, so in this case he was made with the knowledge, or there is another / additional explanations of the prophecy somewhere in Castletown. Possibly in the basement we haven't gone to, since we know it's not in his room. If we instead assume that Ralsei does have a co-conspirator, then his reasoning changes. If this co-conspirator and/or additional source of information is Gaster, then there's again a few outcomes. If we assume that the prophecy is Gaster's creation, and what he means when he says my Deltarune, then he was the one to tell Ralsei about the soul, and is how Ralsei knows the prophecy. Ralsei putting the space in Deltarune is either to distance himself from Gaster in our perspective, or subconsciously as foreshadowing of his deceit. If the prophecy is not Gaster's creation, then Gaster has his own Deltarune, a second ending that he wishes to fulfill and tells to Ralsei. Ralsei, just like with the prophecy, doesn't like its ending, and again, the space in Deltarune represents a change in the prophecy that Ralsei wants, a third ending. Either outcome leads to the same conclusion though. Ralsei doesn't want the ending to come to fruition, and doesn't know if another ending would be better. The only role Gaster really fulfills here is telling Ralsei about the soul and the prophecy that we see. If the co-conspirator is instead Team Roaring Knight, or just Chris as a hinge, then we can assume that the interruption during the Gornamaker sequence happens earlier in the story, because enough time has to pass for Ralsei to know what the soul is capable of. This isn't a bizarre thought either, because we know that time passes for Gaster between chapters. This would also explain why Chris has a save file in the Dark World the first time you play Deltarune. In this case, the space in Deltarune would not be intentional, but again as foreshadowing of the legend he's saying being a lie. The reason Ralsei lies about the outcome of the prophecy here could still be because he wishes for the ending to change, but he could also be trying to keep information away from the soul. A human is very different to the cage with human soul and parts. This could be a way to make us believe that everything is still on track for Gaster's plan, while Ralsei and the team work against it. Another interesting thing, in the case that Ralsei is on Team Roaring Knight, is that the prophecy we see in Chapter 4's Dark World could be made up by them. The prophecy in Chapter 4 still follows the rules of a general Dark World, presumably being affected by the creator's perception. If the prophecy we see is a religious book in the Light World rather than the manifestation of the religion or something, then that means it could have been vandalized. Obviously, in this case, it would be vandalized by the Roaring Knight, lying about the ending to mislead Susie, which is one of the few things we know is a goal of theirs. However, if Ralsei isn't on Team Roaring Knight, I don't think this is a possibility. He would have mentioned the discrepancy in the prophecy if it had been vandalized by anyone. No one in particular comes to mind. So, that's what I think the space in Deltarune represents. From a meta perspective, it doesn't make much sense for there to be a space there. Or rather, for there to still be a space there in Chapter 3, and especially 4 when it was revisited. Now that Ralsei's legend has been exposed as fake, and we're late to the party, I wonder how Chapter 5 will open. Will it open again with the original version, the altered Chapter 4 version, a different cutscene like the Roaring one, or maybe even some panels from the prophecy? I don't think it'll be nothing, or even that it'll be important, but I do have a question for you. Who or what is Ralsei's additional source of information? And how does that play into his story at the start of the game and in the future? Anyway, that's the video. It's short, but I've already got something cooking that didn't really fit well in here. Trust me, I tried. The timeline video I made received a ton of love, and I appreciate it beyond belief. It took me a while to make, and I'm glad everyone enjoyed it as much as I did making it. This video is way different because it's almost entirely theorizing. I don't know whether you'd prefer that I cover all facets of a theory, like in this video, or if you think I should only cover the one I believe. Personally, I enjoy viewing theories from all angles, especially ones like this that could be slotted into other theories. Like Ralsei and Gaster being connected, or planning things with Chris behind our back. Covering every significant different scenario feels like the more logical thing to do, at least with something small like this. As always, you can catch me getting footage and theorizing live over at Martian_Fox on Twitch. Sometimes it's serious and other times they're crackpot theories, but we love it. Additionally, I made a Discord. It's not specifically for Deltarune, but due to my autism, I'll be talking about it a ton there, so that's how you can catch me offline. Anyway, this video is about 1,500 words, but I still think it's considered short, and it was well worth it to cover all the perspectives. So that's me. Sayonara!